Okay, here we go. Is this charging? I think it is. It's, I think it's charging. Um, anyhow, so we're up to Luis Rodriguez. Are you here? Or are you online? Are you Luis? No. Oh, okay. Let's take attendance for the once a semester attendance. Dilver Singh? Yeah. Okay, great. Uh, and then Ashley? No?
Yeah,
And
I'm here.
then that's it. Okay. So I think we're missing like two people. Okay. Okay. I take attendance, I think, for a couple of more times. I forgot when I have to hand it in. Okay. So let's start. Um, okay. So did anybody sign up for presentation? I know someone signed up for next week, I think, right? For September 4th, right? Oh, that was okay. Oh, two people signed up already? Yay. Okay. So normally you would be here right after I started the Zoom, right? You normally you would go up to over here and you would um, go to where is this? Hold on a second. I gotta minimize this guy. Uh, hi. Oop, I don't want that. I want to hide floating main controls. Okay, so normally we would go to over here and we're recording, right? I think we are. Let me know if I'm not recording. Uh, yeah, I'm pretty sure we are. And um, so normally at the beginning of class, let's say if there are people who are presenting, which is an easy grade, so you got to be kind of, I don't know, sometimes people don't do it. Um, but I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to do it. It's a guaranteed pretty much A. So if you don't do it, it's kind of silly, in my opinion. And so normally you would go over here and you would go to, why is this thing opening up? It's just slow. And you would go, what? Well, why is nothing here? It's really slow. Oh, so normally you would go to upload your presentations here, and you would, if your presentation would be here in PowerPoint or whatever. Nope, it doesn't have to be PowerPoint, and then you just, present it for 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, okay? So that's how it works. Okay, so before your presentation, you upload your presentation to this folder and then you present it and for 5 minutes and then I'll give you a grade on the other website. What's it called? What what's it called? Brightspace. Oh, Brightspace, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I got mixed up because it's whatever. We have like CUNY first, we have Blackboard, and then another school I use Moodle. Ever heard of Moodle? Anyhow, so they like all these. Keep it can't, it's hard to keep track of all the different. Okay, so today we'll start with the first class, which is basically we'll start with our book. Okay. In not every class will we be doing this, right? So I already uploaded the basic, this should be the whole chapter one that I'm interested in doing. Let me just make sure I did it. Yeah. So I just want to go through chapter one. So normally, I'm going to go around I'm going to jump around. Okay, for example, this class we're just going to go through chapter one, and then hopefully we'll finish it, and then this is already on Google Docs, so I'll copy it to class two along with the recording from this class. Okay, so of course, the most important question is that big? Can everybody see that? Okay. Is that what is software engineering? Okay. So a lot of people put on their resume software engineer, but they don't really know what a software engineer does. because I think it's sort of sound like a better program, right? Seem like a senior programmer would be or a really good programmer would be a software engineer, right? But the truth is, especially if you look at this book, which you don't really have to, but if you want to look at it, and I'm not discouraging you from looking at it, but if you look at it, you'll see that software engineering is actually not, it's not really programming. In fact, you don't even have to know programming, right? What is similar? What would be like an example of a software engineer? Well, think of, let's say, a person that manages a construction project, right? So let's say if you go to somebody who's, I don't know, let's say someone who manages the buildings in Queens College, right? So they don't have to know how to clean up stains. They don't have to know everything about everything, right? They just have to know that to check, oh, does this room look presentable? Did they clean the stains or whatever, right? Did they? I don't know. It looks a different color, but I don't think it's them. Anyhow, but maybe they put new lights in. I don't know. It looks a little different. Um, and maybe they actually washed out all the years of dust. I don't know. So, because I usually, when I come to class, I'm usually sneezing by now. So it must have done something good. So, um, so basically the idea is that just because you manage something doesn't mean you know all the intricacies of what you're managing. So basically, you have a broad knowledge of what's involved, right? And you make sure that it gets done, right? Right, because you can't know everything, right? So basically, a software engineer is somebody who manages a project. Okay, specifically a software project. Okay, so I'll just right over here. By the way, I purposely don't use PowerPoint. I once got there was another professor that evaluated me. And even though I'm not really a full-time professor, but I still got evaluated. And his comment was he doesn't use PowerPoint. Well, the reason I know it is because when I watch PowerPoint, I fall asleep. So I just watch the pages go by and it goes in one ear. And when they go to the next slide, I forgot what the first one did. So that's why I don't. I purposely want to write it out as we go, sort of like a chalkboard, right? It's like a digital chalkboard. Um, anyhow, which I think Zoom does. Does anyone know how to use Zoom like as a digital chalkboard? There is a way to do it, like you could draw a thing. Okay, I never spent the time to study that. Anyhow, so software engineering is um, like similar to, so a software engineer is very similar to a what's it called? Those people who do construction, like a contractor, right? It's very similar. Um, Let me just shrink this a little bit. Okay, it's very similar um, to um, um, a contractor. Um, Maybe I should download a Word because I'm not that good at with Google Docs. So I'll just download it and then I'll upload it. Um, okay, okay, here it is. But I'll upload it in the appropriate folder after we're done. Um, I think it's getting charged. No, it's not. Let me just get my own charger. Oh, these are headphones. Is it, pull that out, charger? No, it's not working. So why is this working? Um, I forgot my charger. Great. I'm sorry. Oh, it is charging now. Oh, but I think it's trying to, oh, I have to pick USB-C. Oh, okay. Now we're good. Okay. Come on. Not that, um, no. Uh, uh, okay. I was so excited then I didn't have to, um, bring my charger, but I guess I have to. Okay. Uh, it's not charging. Great. Okay. I'll just use this. Does anybody have a charger, by the way, like for like a phone? It might work. What? Uh, like this? It's the same one, but this one's not. Sorry. Uh, um, oh, you have a computer charger or a phone charger? That works for your computer? Oh, great. Yes, yes, so does mine. I really appreciate it. I'm really sorry. I'm just gonna have to leave one here. So I'm gonna have to, thank you so much. Okay. It goes like, thank you. Yeah. It was, yay. Okay. Okay. So we said a software engineer is very similar to a what? Oh, it's not showing. Oh, I have to go back. Okay. So a software engineer is very similar to a contractor um, who man who manages the construction of a new building. Okay. So now you know something that I didn't know for like a long time. I think I always put in my resume, uh, soft programmer, analyst slash software engineer or something like that. And I had no idea that I was actually saying, claiming to do things that I didn't know how to do. Okay, so because a software project is a software engineer is managing a software project, the next question is, well, what is a software project, right? So the answer is basically everything, right? So the answer is everything involved in producing a software project, except for like the non-technical aspects, like financing and also hardware. Okay. Hardware is a software, not engineer. It's a whatever. They have a different title. They're the software. They're the maybe just hardware engineers. Okay, whatever. But they have a different. No, they're the uh, I forgot their title, but basically they're a different category. So basically, we're just involved with software. We're not worried about how the desktops are wired up and all that, how the internet cables work, and how the database gets backed up and stuff like that. Right? We're just worried about the actual software code itself. Okay, so the next question is obviously going to be, well, what exactly are the steps in developing a software project, right? And there's what do you have to do to create to create a software project? What do you have to do, right? So, um, so over here, I put down some of the steps that I could think of. And I mean, most of these are, some of these are in the book. Some of them, if you will Google or ask ChatGPT, they'll give you more or less. I think they'll give you less. These are usually like 5 steps, but I added a couple more. Okay. So we'll just go through the basic, these are, I can, like number one, you usually don't find in the list, but I think I noticed our book mentioned it, and I think it is a very important thing to be part of the software process. Because like often when people discuss a software project, what's left out is well, especially if let's say you work inside a company in a team and you're working and your customer is the company you work for. So a lot of times what doesn't like I've been in meetings where like we're designing a screen for one person, literally. Only one person is going to use it. And somebody says, I think we need a graphic artist to design the screen. And my manager says, okay. And I I say, well, aren't we concerned at all about like maybe we're spending too much money on, for one, to writing a screen for one person internally that no one except that one person is going to use? Like, we're really that bad? We can't write like to me, that was like such, because, but you lose sight of the actual cost that's involved. Like I know, like where I work, I work and the project that I work, the projects I do are internal to the company. So there's no like I have my salary. So there's really no like people who asked for things or, things to be done to software. They really don't really, you know, they just want it done. But there's no cost associated between what they want and and how much it's going to cost the company and my time or things other projects I could have been working on, right? So they just want, I want it to look good on my screen at home, and my screen at home is weird resolution, and so I need you to redesign the screen so it looks good for my screen, right? So what actually happened was a couple of years ago that somebody mentioned to that, and I told my boss, you know what? It'd be a lot cheaper just to buy the person a new screen. And my boss agreed. He said, "Yeah, that's right," because the amount of hours I would need to spend to make it work for that one screen and probably mess up for other screens, right? That the amount of time is just cheaper to buy him a screen, for that one person or one or two people who have those, issues with their, and that's what we did. Just put them in a bigger screen, and we never changed I mean, like screen like this, we didn't change the graphical screen, the code part. So and save money. So you have to think like the first like one of the first questions is do you realize that's what feasibility is basically is do you realize what you're asking for? In other words, you want us to have your code run on like right now it's running on a PC, you want it to run on a smartphone. Do you realize the costs involved, the risks involved, right? So that's what feasibility is that when, and also you need a little self-examination of yourself. If someone walks up to me, I'm not a, I'm not really into, I don't really know a lot about web programming, and I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not gonna, if I go for a job interview, I wouldn't tell people I'm expert in, JavaScript and stuff like that. I wish I was, but I'm not. So I could do, I do mostly desktop development, so even though nowadays it's not like um, it's sort of like, that's not the greatest skill, to be able to, you need really to write web applications, but, but that's my skill set right now. So someone would come up to me and ask me to, run a project that does web stuff. I don't really know anything about it, so I would have to be honest and say, I really, it's not feasible for me to do it. It would be sort of like stealing your money if I would say I could do it, and then I would waste all your money figuring out how to do it, right? So feasibility means on both ends. Number one, do I have the skills that you need, right? For your project, right? Do I have experience in that? Or is it like or is it or and also do you have the money? Could you afford could you afford the amount of work that's involved? Because most people have no idea how much time things actually take, how much work, right? Um, it's really weird. Like sometimes you could change like something on a screen, and it'll make a big change, changing fonts and stuff like that. And that could take like 5, 10 minutes. And sometimes it could it could take a couple days. So you have to know what the actual time it's going to be, right? So usually something has to do with screen resolution. That's usually going to take a long time because then you have to keep testing with different screen resolutions. So in your computer it looks great, but then you give it to the client and it doesn't look good. And then you have to go back and then you have to figure out, and then it won't look good on your screen, but so it's things like those type of things will drive you crazy, right? Um, so you have to know ahead of time, though. You have to warn them that, if it's a color, that's cheap that's a 5 minute change. If it's a, um, change in something complicated, that's specific, to different platforms, then you should warn them, say, this might end up costing you a lot of money. It's not a simple thing. Um, okay, so that's feasibility. Okay. So I would say you have to, everybody has to be honest with each other about the cost and the skills. Then, okay, this you will find on nearly every website. And I just put in both buzzwords. So even though they're slightly different, requirements and specifications, this basically means that, in other words, when someone asks me to write a program, right, that I shouldn't say, okay, you have money. I say, do you have money? They say, yes, we have funding. So I shouldn't say, okay, in a week I'll show you my first rough draft or mock-up of the program. What I should do is, before I do any code or even mock-ups, is I have to have a lengthy conversation what they want the program to do, or what they expect it to do, right? This is crucial because if you don't do this, then you're you're going to be in for a big headache, right? And because you can't like do something, hand it over to the client, and then the client says, "Oh, I thought it would work differently. This isn't what I wanted." And then you have to redo it, and then the cost. Well, look at the military, right? Whenever they make they build something new, a new jet fighter, it's always billions of dollars in overruns because they keep changing as they go along, so it's very important not to do that, not to have specific requirements when you start, and then or we call it, or specifications, and I'm using them interchangeably, but they're really different. But they're very similar, right? Requirements are what the customer wants, and specification is, I believe, is more. It's from the programmer's perspective. It has to do this and this. It's more specific. Okay, to reuse the word itself. Okay, so basically, you always start out with, what do you want done? Tell me what you want. Don't just say, I need a program that that sends mail and receives mail, because why not use Outlook, Gmail, or something else, right? Tell me how you want it to be different than what's out there, right? Don't you can't just say, I want an email program. You have to say, I want an email program because because it does something very that no other program does. It encrypts something no one else, whatever it does. Okay, so you need requirements. You can't just you know you never waste any time or even write code that you think the client is going to want until they actually tell you what they want, because otherwise you're just wasting your time or their money or both. Okay, so in general, you need requirements before you do anything. Then design architecture. that's like internal, that basically once you know what they want and you understand what they want and they understand that you understand, so then you do, then you would, this would be internal, right? So this would be required specification. This is requirements is from these are basically, um, these come from the client, right? And then this would be internal to the developer, right? You would, you don't need the client for this part of it, right? You would design how it's, you would, how the project is going to be architected, right? And we're going to add, I think it's chapter 8. We're going to see the different ways that projects or programs could be architected, okay? Right? Does anybody know like what's the architecture, or just to give you an idea of what I mean, does anybody know what is a desktop application? What does that mean? In general, right? It just means that it's something, a program where the whole program is on the computer, right? That's a desktop application, right? But what would a web application be? Like what architecture would that have? It's a very, very specific um, architecture. Like what is Chrome? Like for example, I go to Chrome, right? For example, when I go to Google Docs, what are the, how is this, how is Google Docs, how is it architected? Like, well, you see there's a browser, right? There's a browser, I have a browser, right? So that's one part of it, right? But what else is there? There's somewhere also somewhere on the internet somewhere in the, they call it the, usually you draw the internet as a cloud, the picture of a cloud. So somewhere on the internet somewhere, there's a server somewhere where my data is being stored, right? So that's called client. Well, another way of saying that would be client server. So the web browser would be the client, right? Half of it, and then the other half would be the server, right? So all web applications are divided up into two parts, right? One is what's on the client machine or the browser, what's on the browser, and or it doesn't always have to be a browser, but all web stuff is. I mean, it has. I'm trying to think of things that don't. Everything usually has a browser. 99.9, there's a browser, right? And then there's a server somewhere else, right? And then they communicate with each other. So that's a type of architecture, right? So you have like desktop, where everything is just on one computer. You have client server, where like for example, Microsoft Word, right, theoretically doesn't need the internet, right, to work, right? All the processing is done on my computer, right? If I'm in an airplane, I could still edit a document. I don't know about Google Docs, how that works if you're on an airplane and there's no internet, or subway, there's no internet. I don't know how that works. Uh, I think my wife told me it works offline, but I don't know. Has anybody ever done Google Docs offline? I'm not sure how that would work. Uh, but, I mean, but basically, at least before, it was originally designed as a client server application, meaning that if you have no internet, you have no Google Docs, right? Um, then you have, okay, then there are variations on that, but those are like uh, then there's also like, you could have, um, for example, like a desktop application, but part of the desktop application would have a client server aspect to it. So for example, like I believe licensing on Microsoft Word, you need to, you can't just, there's no license to type in. You would have to communicate over the internet in order to be able to use the Microsoft Word, one time just to get the license information, whatever, or to enter it, right? To activate the program, right? So it could be a combination of desktop and client server, right? So it doesn't, it could be more than just one architecture. Okay, so that's all decided, hopefully up front. And then, so that's internal um, to the programmers or or internal to the, project developers. Okay, so that would be, so requirement, uh, I should, these come from the client or come or are based on what the client requests. Um, okay, then finally we got to the programming part, and if you have a resume, you might, if you don't, you should use all these different words. So instead of saying, yeah, I wrote this program, wrote that program, you would say I coded, I programmed, I developed, I implemented. They all mean the same thing, right? But just like so you don't repeat the same verb over and over again on your resume, you typically will switch it around, right? So, but these are all the buzzwords, right? So now I wrote over here, which is something very interesting, which is that normally in most companies, there's usually, in other words, yeah, in most companies, unless it's a very small company, uh, like only like two or three developers. But in most companies, they have like usually have two groups. You have besides the once you get to the coding, right? There's also another group afterwards that tests the code, right? Like I used to work for a company, we were very small. So what we would do is we really didn't have any money to pay for people to sit around testing our code. So after we thought it, we said, hey, it works. So we would basically, its interesting idea was we'd wait for a client would either report a bug or request a new feature. And we'd say, you know what? Okay, we'll do it for you, but you're the guinea pig. And do you want that feature? Okay, you're going to be our guinea pig, and we would give them like a newer version, and then if they said it's working well, or or there was fine bugs with it, we would fix it for them, and then finally, if it passed them, then we would release it to everyone in our next major release. But but most companies don't use the clients as guinea pigs, right? Not a good way to do business, right? So normally you have a testing group, right, which could be one person, could be, more than that. I don't know. Nowadays with AI, how that works. Um, um, but, uh, um, but normally you have two different groups of people, right? We have the developers and the testers, right? And, but there's actually one type of testing which is done by the programmers themselves. It's usually programmers can't just write code and say works, goodbye, test it. Prove to me it doesn't work, right? Because normally, like, people like to go home, say, I'm done, I'm finished with this, great. And they don't want to test their code, but they don't want to look for problems, right? Right? You pay somebody to do some work for you to, let's say, um, to fix your toilet or whatever, I don't know, fix your plumbing, right? They're not going to like, let me see, let me stand around for 10 minutes and open up all the faucets and see if there's a leak or how well it works, if it still works, right? They'll just say, oh, looks good. Or you go to a mechanic, right? Oh, I replaced the hose. It's great. And then you drive out and the car or and you see that they didn't fix it, and you bring it back to them again, right? So that's the normal tendency of programmers is to say it works and you find something wrong with it. Otherwise, by default, it's good. because I say so. Yeah, right. So we don't like that. So there's something called it's called a unit test. Have you ever heard that expression before? A unit test? So a unit test is actually a test, which we'll get into. And actually, for the project, I would like you to create your own unit test, and you'll see that it's simple, but the idea is that the programmer should write some tests that test the basic functionality, and they don't have to test it like in all different scenarios like the testing group will, but there's a unit test where it's just considered to be part of the development. That's what's unique about it is because it's normally testing is not done by the development group, I mean, by the programmers, but they should write the unit tests, right? So these should be written by them, and the test should be run before they hand off the code and say it works. Okay. So that's why I wrote over here that unit tests are always written by the developer, and I should say written and run by the developer, right? So these are like the basic things that basic tests that the developer has to make sure the code passes before they go to number five, which is a testing or QA group, right? It's called different, we really have different meanings technically, but most companies you'll say QA. Does anybody know what QA stands for?
Quality assurance.
Right, right. Right. So quality assurance is not really testing. Quality assurance is really a way of examining the process and making sure that the process we're using, in other words, like how did this bug slip through? In other words, right? Let's say, we're producing I don't know, peanut butter, and there's a peanut with a shell, you know, showed up in the peanut butter jar. So a QA person would say, what's wrong with our process that allowed a whole peanut to end up in a peanut butter jar, right? There must have been something we need to do or to fix that because that should not have happened, right? So that was QA. But testing is really just testing, meaning that you would just open up a bunch of peanut butter jars, say, tastes good or tastes bad, That's what testing would be. We wouldn't be examining our process, we would just be testing it, right? Like opening taking random jars of peanut butter, and sounds like a fun job, right? And tasting it to make sure that it's good. So, um, okay. But it's used interchangeably, right? They'll call this the QA, but it's really a little bit different than testing. Um, so, okay. And then after we've done uh, the testing, then we would have what's called deployment, which is a fancy way of saying we give it to the client, right? We install it somehow on their machine, or somehow, we release it to the client. Nowadays, a lot of programs are web programs. Uh, you know, Most companies try to make all software web software, so there's nothing to really, when you deploy it, all you have to do is just give people a new domain or something, so there's no like, there's no big investment in installing it on their machines. Okay, but release deployment basically means that we say that this code is good enough, and we're going to release it to tell people, hey, start using our new version of our software, or our first version of our software, that it's really working well. Okay, so that would be the next thing. Now, I number seven is something you probably hear a lot about, but it's a little bit what I've seen where I work. and is very in other words, like when I remember like a company I used to work for, like my first company I worked for, I think was it or I forgot which company it was, but I think but it was like at the beginning of my career, um, I they told me like every 5 lines you have to have I think it was my first job. Uh, they said every 5 lines of code you have to have a comment. Okay. And the reason for that was because so easy for yourself and other people to fix the code later on to see what's going on, right? Because, a lot of times people do things in them, like you open up a car and you'll see, hey, what does this thing do? And you just say, okay, yeah, I don't need it. Then you find out, well, it was put there because they found out that after 10,000 miles, the thing gets loose, and if you don't put that little clip there, the whole thing is going to fall apart, right? So yeah, so you need some type of documentation sometimes to keep track of these things. Otherwise, no one knows why it's there, and they won't know what it was supposed to fix. Maybe the thing it was meant to fix doesn't that problem doesn't exist anymore, right? So you need a documentation for that type of thing, but the problem with documentation, so that sounds great, right? It's really easy. People could just look at the code, you give a nice explanation every 5 lines of code. So, but there's a big problem with that. And there's this guy on the internet, his name is Robert Martin. Robert, I don't know if have anybody heard of him? Robert C. Martin? Uh, well, a lot of his course is based on him. I became his number 1 fan. So he's, well, not number one, but I like a lot of his ideas. And this one I really relate to, which is like, for example, where I work, I have code which is very old. Like some of it is, uh, the people wrote it had left the company like 15, 20 years ago. And the code was already ported from one language to right now I'm doing C sharp pretty much. So it was ported from VB to VB.NET to C sharp. So, but the comments came along with it. But when you look at the comments, they don't make any sense because when the person who wrote it 20 years ago, it made sense. But the code has changed so much in the last, since they wrote it, even if it's 2 years ago, right? Usually code is always changing. So especially nowadays with new technology, new ways of doing things. So if a person writes a comment or writes a page of that documentation, chances are the code will change and documentation won't. So where I work now, or our current, I shouldn't say where I work now, but with the people I work with now, the way we do it is we don't document that much. We only document things that are not obvious, right? So for example, if we have a method that adds 0.5 to a number, or it's not obvious, why you're adding 0.5 to the result, right? So, or something like that. If you do something that's not, somebody looking at the code doesn't, it's not that apparent why you're doing it. So, oh yeah, like for example, this is like somewhere in our code we have where there's a problem when you double click it or whatever, it's something to do with clicking. So when you click a column, the code does something different. The library we pay for does something different than normally it would happen with regular Windows code. So in order to get around it, the person wrote this whole workaround, which is not obvious why they did that. First question you look at is like, why did they write this for, right? Why did they write this whole complicated way of handling a certain event, right? Why did they? And the answer is because the library doesn't support it. So that needs to be documented because the first thing I would do is delete that code because I would say, why do you need it for? Right? And then after we would release it, and people would start complaining, then I'd find out why that code was there. But but we want to find it, right? So, but in general, we don't document obvious stuff, right? So like if a code, a method is, let's say, get, get first, get all people, I'm just making up something, get all people who live in Kentucky, right? Or get people who live in the state, and you pass in the name of the state. So then it's pretty obvious what it's doing. You don't have to say, well, this function gets all the people who live in the state, and here's the code below. And these are the parameters, state, and that would, because if later on you would change it from, let's say you instead of state, you would do zip code, right? Then all of a sudden the documentation would not match the code anymore, right? And programmers are definitely never gonna, if no one yells at them, they're not gonna update the documentation. I mean, only the most, um, you know, um, really, uh, uh, a proper programmer would update documentation. Like no one ever bothers to do that. Like, they'll just change the code, make it work, and go home, right? They're not gonna, and no one's looking over their shoulder saying, "Oh, did you update the documentation?" You know, so, um, so that's why this guy, he called himself Uncle Bob. You can look it up. He's on YouTube. He has, actually the UML, uh, um, um, the UML, diagrams. It's based on his, part of this course. He actually wrote a book about it, and, of how to do that. Um, so anyhow, so he called himself Uncle Bob, and he's one of like the people behind, agile programming and object-oriented programming. And one of his, piece of advice is minimize documentation. Okay, does everybody know why you should minimize? Because what? Because what's the reason why? Because it's a waste of time, right? Why? Because because what's going to change? The code, but not but no one's going to update the documentation. So it's just a waste. It's a waste of time. Of course, if you work for a company and your boss says, document every 5 lines, do it. I don't want you to lose your job. But in general, if you have a choice, it's better not to document unless it's for clarity, to explain to other people why you did the strange thing that you did, right? But in general, you would, like, I just saw some crazy code where they they and I have no idea why the person did it. I didn't bother, but it was like they like they set the text of a screen inside a thread. I don't, I have no idea why they did that. They're like, there's no comments or anything. And why can't you just set it without a thread? It's very, very strange. It's like maybe they were playing around and they were trying to see what they could get away with. I don't know. Maybe they copied it from somewhere, but it didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But of course, I don't know why they did it, so I can't get rid of it. So, yeah. So that's the problem. Okay, so that's documentation. So documentation, it really depends on your company. Every company basically you work for, or unless you start your own company or you write your own code, will have their own existing documentation practices. So you just have to do whatever they do, right? So you can't say, well, I'll show you a YouTube video and Uncle Bob says it's not such a good idea. Yeah. You don't do that, right? Yeah, okay. And then last thing is, they call it evolution, but it really means maintenance, which is basically you're coming up with a new version, and then you would start, again from the very beginning. How much, what are we doing? How much, how much do you think this is going to cost? Either, just because you work for the company doesn't mean it's free. It just means because whatever you're doing, you're spending on one project, you're not, it's not being spent on a different project that might be worth more for the company. So there's always a cost, right? Involved with work. Okay, yeah, so that's the last step I put there. evolution and maintenance, which is the same thing. The book calls it evolution, which is a very interesting way of using it, but most people call it maintaining code. Okay, which is either fixing it or adding things, right? By the way, does anybody know the words for fixing code? Like how would you, let's say you fixed code, you fixed something in the code, what would you call that? What did you fix? Do you know the terminology? So usually it's probably, I mean, we say bugs in code, but usually the proper way to say it would be defects. Right? And something new would be called a feature, right? So I'll write that down. So creating a new version, so new version could either have one or both of the, would be either would be usually new features or defects fixed. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So we already went through this. This is like the non-software part. This is not included in a software project, financing, hardware, and advertising, right? These are all somewhere else, someone else would do that. Um, Okay, and this is very interesting, is how has technology affected the software process? So basically, um, AI has sped up development process. I mean, I think artificial intelligence, I mean, like every company now says they use AI, or they do AI. Like even Zoom has, did anybody know that Zoom has AI? And wonder like what do they do with AI? Like what are they doing? So they actually, I think they have a feature. I'm not sure if um this version has it, the one that I'm using for this class, but they have this, I know at work they have it. They have this feature where like if you're listening to a meeting on Zoom, they'll summarize the meeting. So you don't have to even go to the meeting anymore, right? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think I personally, I like at work with our people, like who claim that it speeds up their development process. But I refuse to use it because I think makes people dumb. No, it takes over. It's one thing if it corrects your spelling, because okay, maybe you don't have to memorize. I mean, put like this, everything that you do have the machine do, you're not going to do. So, like, no one anymore remembers phone numbers. I remember there was a time I used to know my have to work really hard remembering my friend's phone number, right? Now with cell phones, no one knows phone numbers anymore, right? Maybe their own they know, but that's about it, right? And then now with these word processing, no one knows how to spell anymore, right? Because everything you use basically a spell correction and not even a grammar correction, right? So you don't even have to you don't have to know how to spell, you don't have to know how to write. So it's slowly removing our brain. So I put my foot down at work. I never use like ChatGPT, even though it might work, might not work, because I don't want to forget how to program. Okay. Besides the fact that a lot of times it doesn't work, and like I like there's one guy at work who I was thinking about how to do. He said, oh, give me 5 minutes, I'll get back to you. And then he went to ChatGPT, and the thing is, the one he gave me from ChatGPT didn't work. And it was a waste of, so I don't know, the 20 minutes he thought he saved by, having ChatGPT do it. I had to debug the program, find out that it doesn't work. Yeah, first of all, it just didn't work, the program. Then I had to find out where it wasn't working, and it turned out it was the code from ChatGPT, which I think the reason it didn't work was because neither of us understood how it worked. because it was using, I don't know if you know regular expressions, but it's very complicated. Have you ever seen a regular expression? It's like very weird. It's like, a bunch of different symbols, dots,
Yeah,
regex.
yeah.
Oh, you know that? Yeah, I don't know it, and I don't think he knew it a little bit, but I didn't know it at all. And it wasn't until, and I assumed it worked because he put into the code, but it didn't. So, so after he fixed it, um, he ended up fixing it by actually understanding how it worked, and he fixed the problem. But then I actually wrote some unit tests to make sure it really worked. So, so now we know if at least this method will always work. So anyhow, but you do have to, you can't say I'm not going to use AI if everyone else is using AI and they're getting stuff done a lot faster. But so far I get away with it. But there'll probably be a time when, I won't be able to. Um, but I personally don't want it. I don't think I think it's a bad for people. Um, and there are a lot of, I saw a lot of YouTube things about the same, that they discussed that AI just basically makes people dumber. It does, because if you don't, if you give you're giving it over to another process. Okay. And so another one today where she was claiming that, the AI is really just like a marketing term, and it's not really as beneficial as everybody claims it is. It's just like, you know, okay, well, I haven't seen it done. I haven't seen it do miracles, I've seen it, like, normally let's say I want to do something, I'm stuck, I'll usually Google it. So ChatGPT is like a better Google, from what I could see. It's not, amazing, yeah. Um, I mean, some things it does is pretty amazing. Like you can give a text and it'll create like half the YouTube videos is AI, right? Speaking. It's not really people. You can tell the way they speak robotically, right? It's I don't, yeah, so I don't even know if the whole channels, some of these YouTube channels are even real. Like they might just be taking text from some magazine somewhere and then take some pictures from somewhere, and they pretend that it's theirs, right? It's not their voice, it's not their content. Yeah, they just want to get views. Okay, anyhow, so, okay, so one thing is AI has definitely, whether it's, it definitely seems to have sped it up at least a little bit. Some people say a lot, yeah. Um, so that's number one. Number two is that um, that nowadays we have many more platforms that used to exist, right? Used to be that people just had a computer terminal and they had a mainframe computer, right? Which they were just had a screen and a keyboard. They didn't even have a computer. Uh, but now you have all these different platforms. You have um, smartphones, what you can even have, like stuff running in your house, right? Running things. Um, so there are a lot more different platforms. Okay, so that makes software development much more complicated. Um, and number C would be availability, meaning that it used to be that your users were, just the people who, read your advertising, they heard about you. But now, if you're on the internet, you have a potential 4 billion customers. And that's crazy, right? Everybody in the world could be your customer, right? It's a crazy thought, yeah. Um, and so that is wild, And on the other hand, that means also anyone in the world could attack you, right? You're open to everybody in the world say, hey, try and get me, right? So you got to be really good nowadays. to stop people from breaking in. Okay, and again, because we're dealing now, most software is web software. So now you're competing not against somebody in, one or two people. Your competition is going to be the whole world, right? No, there's a guy, somebody who wrote some software that we use. I think it's a husband and wife in, I forgot what country. So, but like we use it like in where I work, and like you know they're they're making money, and they're just so basically you have to compete with. And what I'm trying to say is like anybody could nowadays compete with anybody. So so you have to really be quick, right? You have reduced delivery window, right? Which of course means that you end up having more bugs because if you're rushing to compete with other people and you're scared about them beating you, right? Um, like, for example, like it's like if you notice, like I was just in Walmart and they were selling Halloween products. Like why are they doing that now? Like who buys Halloween products? And it's not even Labor Day, right? Right. So it's what's the reason? Why? Because people only going to buy, let's say, one Halloween costume, right? So the first person to get that, to get, the first, if you could get that person to buy your Halloween costume, they're not going to buy the other person's Halloween costume, right? Because they're only going to buy, or the other way around. So everybody's like trying to be the first. That's why I think, you have, like now, Black Friday is a whole week before Thanksgiving, because everybody knows people have, they're only going to buy one thing for their friend, one present. So the first person that sells them that present, that's it, they got them, and if they don't get them, someone else got them and they won't get them. So everybody wants to be the first. Um, so there's a lot of pressure to be the first. And because of that, you have to like testing is much more, has to be much more quick. Okay. And number E is what we just said about security. Okay. Okay, I'll just finish off the last part, which is buzzwords. Okay, this is in other words, before we were talking about before we were speaking about um, like the different steps you go through, right? And over here, this is from the chat from the book. I just copied the ideas I thought were important from the chapter one. These are like things that qualities of good software, right? Um, so I call them buzzwords because they are really, right? So for example, performance, that means, like I always think of a high performing car means fast, right? So, so we say our software is good performance, it means it runs quickly. Usability means like how I wrote over there UI UX. Does anybody ever heard that expression UI UX? What does it mean? Very good. Right, right. User interface, user experience. Right. So that's basically nowadays there's no manuals, right? Um, I was just thinking like there's something with my um I got on my car it has like a cruise control, which is I don't know, it's like it automatically and it's like one of those with whatever it is, the point is the cruise control, it acts weird sometimes. Like I think I'm setting it, but it's actually not setting. I don't know. So it's not like I'm not sure 100% sure what the problem is, but the point is that when I complained to the company, they said, "Oh, did you read the manual?" Of course not. Yeah, but they didn't read it either. I don't think they read it either. They just said, "Well, bring it to the dealer." I said, "Yeah, sure. I'm gonna waste a week having them tell me that, yeah." Yeah. So, but like, yes, I just live with, I know that sometimes I'm going to push the the cruise control, and it might work differently than what I thought it would do. So like something, I think I'm setting it to the new speed, but it doesn't set it. It just goes back to the previous speed. Like, so if I driving at 30 on cruise control and then I go onto the highway and I'm going 60 and I want to set it to the new speed, then sometimes I don't know exactly when it does it. It thinks I'm just want to go from 30 to 31 instead of the new. Yeah, I don't know. Like usually if you push the brake, it resets it, it turns it off, but somehow it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't figured out exactly what the bug is, but they're not gonna fix it anyhow. They say, read the manual. So, but nowadays you can't get away with that, right? If you want people to use your software, you got to make it so that it works just by looking at it, right? Because people can't figure out, like this is a good example. Microsoft Word, everything is here. Like, no one has, software used to come with this big documents. No one, there isn't, they don't exist anymore, right? It should be obvious how it works. Um, right? Reliability means that, like if you say, bus is reliable, means it will always be there at the same time every day. Or basically dependable. Functionality. Okay, functionality is a fancy word to mean what does it do? So, so there's two different types of functionality. I'll just end over here. We'll just finish up next week. We'll just finish up the end of this. There's not much left. And functionality basically means what does it do? There's two types of functionality. There's a functionality which is very specific, which is a functional requirement, and a non-functional requirement is something which the software has to do, but it's more general. Okay, it's usually something it's implied, but it's not specified. Meaning, like if I say, I'm really thirsty, could you get me a Coke? Or, or I go to a pizza shop and I say, I'm thirsty, could you give me a Coke? So you would expect that the Coke, even though I never said it, should be cold, right? They're not gonna give me a warm Coke. But they do, I'm not gonna be too happy, right? So the functional requirement was I need a Coke, a can of Coke. But the non-functional would be, it should be cold, right? So nowadays, like a website is, I need a website. So that was what I asked for. But usually what would be implied that it's a secure website, right? Because nowadays all websites are nearly 99.9% of all websites are secure, right? So that would be the non-functional requirement. Okay. Okay, so we'll just finish up next week on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. And yeah. Okay, I'll just stop recording. Oh, thank you for yeah. Wow, you're a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, what's your name, by the way?
Ronnie,
Ronnie, thank you.
that's good.
Yeah, yeah, see you. Oh, yeah.
Hi,
Have a good weekend.
Professor.